program with a specific eye toward cultural and linguistic inclusiveness. And Susie, we have with us from SVPR Communications. Susie is a bilingual communications professional with extensive experience in San Diego city government, political campaigns, and the private sector. She's a former policy advisor to the San Diego City Council and has coordinated over a dozen local campaigns for mayors, city councils, school boards, the state assembly, and ballot propositions. Thanks so much, Susie, for having us.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you to LGC and SOPA for inviting me to speak today about inclusive communications. So let's start. So inclusive communications are not some type of utopian, everything is awesome communication that make us all feel good that we are being diverse. It's not that. Inclusive communications are not a simple exercise in using pictures of diverse happy faces representing different ethnic, age, racial, and other groups. Inclusive communications do not treat groups of people like a bowl of M&Ms, where you can have one of every color, but it might still not be an inclusive communication. So inclusive communications is not like only a simple exercise of translating English into 30 different languages just to appeal to more demographic groups, which can do sometimes more harm than good if the translation misses the mark because it's not culturally competent. Inclusive communications go deeper and make a connection that welcomes people into your world, the world of your agency or your municipality, and invites your constituents to engage and participate with you. That is very different than preparing communications that might look and feel sometimes diverse, but they are essentially only one-way communications that sometimes they don't motivate people to do anything. Inclusive communications are designed to engage a big set of customers, constituents, and other stakeholders. Inclusive communications motivate and create a perception and attachment to your agency by offering something that is meaningful, creates trust, supports a relationship, and gives your audience a constant reason to like you. Some of the best examples of inclusive communications come from a world of inclusive marketing. Inclusive marketing is designed to carefully appeal to a big audience of potential customers. So this ad that we will show you right now, it's a good example. So it's hard to believe that this ad has been around for 30 years. And there is a reason, because it appeals to people who love the holidays, the beach, and to people who love tranquility. On its face has nothing to do with beer, but you are immediately sucked into the ad, and maybe at the end, when the product sponsor is revealed, maybe then you will consider walking into this world and participating and consuming the product. In the marketing world, inclusive and targeted ads both have their own purpose. Marketers have reasons to either be inclusive or targeted in their communications, depending on what they are trying to sell and what their market's segmentation data is telling them about who drinks beer in this case. So they can even go back and forth over time, which is why you are likely to see this ad every year during the holidays. Every year, the Corona company tries to do a better ad, and every year, believe it or not, they come back to the same ad. So the lesson here for inclusive communications is that you can design communications that go deeper and create a relationship with a broad set of customers or constituents and engages them to participate with you. Here you can see another marketing example of inclusive communication and one that is more limited. On the left, there is an image that appeals to a stereotype. It will appeal to anyone who loves this stereotype. I am from Mexico City, and I can tell you that this would be very limiting in a city of 24 million people. Mexico residents, don't wear sarapes day to day, and they don't wear sombreros unless you are part of a mariachi band. So this image wouldn't invite anybody to do anything with your agency if we want to use it in a campaign or an ad. On the right, there is a photo of a young hipster guy with hipster shoes, urban, which is much more inclusive because appeals to millennials, appeals to people who love the urban setting, and maybe a little bit of, they're nostalgic about the Volkswagen box. So your agency may use images in their social media and print communications, and using truly inclusive images can help to get your constituents to engage with you. So why are so many agencies so challenged when it comes to doing inclusive communications? Why is that local agencies can't master in their communications with their customers or constituents what marketers excel in doing through their advertisements? So marketers are good at their stuff, but why aren't public agencies in their communications? And there are many reasons, but I think that the main two reasons, it's number one, marketers, they invest millions of dollars in understanding their consumers. And most local agencies, they don't have these type of resources. Internally, marketers have a very creative process that integrates lots of different perspectives and opinions, and many local agencies, they don't do it. So let's start with understanding our consumers and constituents. Most agencies rely on democratic data and conduct customer surveys every 3 or 5 years, but sometimes those surveys can carry a couple of biases. One is that sometimes they have a low response rate, so those who respond sometimes may not be representative of your audience. Number two, if the questions don't dig enough, they tend to corroborate what an agency is already doing rather than maybe finding out what your constituents really think. So the key here is dig deeper. It may require from your agency to do more surveys, to have more public consultation with community leaders, to have an idea of what's important to them, what really turns them off. So, for example, an agency could communicate in writing something like, and I'm going to give you here an example, this phrase, this rate increase will replace the turbines in our dam to be in compliance with the federal code for the next 30 years. Okay, that's probably true, a true statement, but it devoids of anything that will engage a customer. Or maybe an agency learns from its customers' research that there is a stronger environmental undercurrent among your customers, which leads you to this very inclusive communication statement. This rate change will help to modernize the dam and to protect the lake's ecosystem for the new generation. So what you are really saying is join our agency in protecting the lake for your grandkids. So knowing your customers isn't inexpensive, but not knowing your customers or constituents can be more costly. Marketers go deeper than agencies and spend, like we say, a lot of money doing so. But I have great news for you. Agencies can build an inclusive process that lead them to more effective and inclusive communications. More people at the table of the internal decision-making on communications can lead to more inclusive communications. So the processes where communications withstand sufficient internal scrutiny by several people of diverse perspectives are stronger communications. Some agencies get to more inclusive communications by using a community advisory groups of 10, 20 leaders representing diverse communities, faiths, professions, etc. Other agencies, they use small focus groups of a diverse set of customers that agreed beforehand, for example, to respond a 48-hour online survey that is designed to test a particular draft communication, and it may cost an agency a few gift cards, and that's very effective and makes communications much more inclusive. So some agencies sometimes contract with communications professionals specializing in language and cultural communications. So the goal of the process is in creating inclusive communications is to get more people to tell you whether you are making a mistake, whether you are getting close to using the right words or images, or whether changing in the words used can open to a communication to a larger audience. You see a lot of non-inclusive written communications that dissuade instead of engaging the world of translation. It's not a matter of simply losing your meaning in translation. I had this conversation with my clients every day. It's a matter of communicating whether you value that customer or constituent enough to get your translated communications right in their own language and in a culturally appropriate way. When an agency messes up with a translation or document, unfortunately, it communicates that the agency didn't care enough about them to invest in a process that gets it right. It's a total turnoff, and it has the exact opposite effect of engagement and participation. Sometimes it's better just to leave it in English, because you don't get points for trying. So how does that happen? This is a question that my clients ask me all the time. So why do we make this mistake over and over again? And the response is because maybe there is a bad or no process. Often I see example of translation where an agency thought that it was a good idea to use a free online translation services, but that's a bad idea because no algorithm in this world can ensure that the cultural part of the translations are done right. Some agencies, they rely on an employee or consultant with a Latino surname. I see this very often, and assume that they can translate into Spanish. Granted, it might be cost effective, but it puts that person in a really bad spot. No one wants to admit to their colleagues that they may not speak Spanish that well, or maybe they don't write it at a high level. So formal language education and professional training in other languages, it's a big deal. Linguistic and cultural competence matters. And we see here in the example, this was a digital campaign that one of the agencies was using, and they use a system, an electronic system, and definitely was not coming across as the way they wanted. So we have to be very careful on that end. So just to wrap up, think about the culture in your agency. Is it a culture that realizes and accepts its own implicit biases and is capable to building a process that cuts right through that to create a more inclusive communications by welcoming more perspectives? Status quo and check the box. are not likely to go deeper to understand your constituents. And agencies, sometimes they use the phrase, because this is how we have always done it. Sometimes I think that we are missing out an opportunity. So why should an agency go through the trouble of investing and creating a process to create inclusive communications? What is the value proposition? What is the return of investment, or ROI? And I have a simple answer. It's influence. Influence with a big set of stakeholders who are engaged with your agency and your mission, who you might need to participate and support you on rate changes, initiatives, or maybe at the ballot box. But you don't get this kind of influence through normal communications. It's what I call, it's not feel good, it's real influence. Thank you very much.